Namaste. Welcome to Sipping on Stories podcast. I'm your host Sehereen, and this is where we welcome women healers and spiritual leaders from all around the world to come and share their journeys and their experiences. Thank you so much, everyone, for showing lots of love to our podcast episodes. And if you're new to this channel, welcome. Please like and subscribe to this channel so we can continue spreading some love. Thank you. Namaste, everyone. Welcome back to this podcast episode. Today, we are diving deep into the transformative world of healing, authenticity, and living aligned with that truth. So joining me is Blaise here. She is an intuitive healer and coach who specializes in helping women uncover and heal conscious patterns, traumas, and fear-based beliefs. Her work empowers women to transform their lives from the inside out, stepping into their fullest and most authentic selves. Blaise, again, namaste, and thank you so much for being here. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So let's start with your journey. And how did you discover this incredible path of intuition and healing? And what inspired you to dedicate your life helping others transform theirs?
Hi, thank you for having me. Very excited to have this conversation. I guess to get where I am today really started with my own journey of transformation. Because I realized that a lot of who I thought I was and the ways that I showed up in the world was actually just ways I'd adapted throughout my childhood and throughout my life. And so I went on this huge journey of trying to find what my truth really was underneath all of that, and kind of through that realizing that there's all these patterns and stories and beliefs that we carry, and they inform and influence who we actually who we are, but we can actually change that. So yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. And this is something I always do. And, thank you for kind of taking us through that. But I always kind of ask my guests to also share where they're joining us from today. So if you can just give our audience a little peek into where you live and what choice of beverage you got with you today.
I actually just have water today because I've been a very healthy girl. But I am in Mexico right now. I'm in the west coast of Oaxaca. But I'm originally from London, England.
Oh, awesome. What is it like living in Mexico and kind of coming from the other side, and so how is it like for you? How are you enjoying the city?
Yeah, I mean, I don't like being cold, so the sun and the beach is very, very good for my soul. It's a completely different way of life. It's just such a slower pace, more just feels more grounded, more natural, especially where I'm from in England, it's like the city, right? So in London, so it's just it's just a fast-paced kind of environment, and it's very busy, so it's very different. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Thank you for sharing your insight. I just kind of love asking people, like my guests, every time, what is it like living in different cities? Because it's amazing how you can connect with people around the world with technology these days, and I kind of kind of feel it in their own voice and when they're kind of vibing in the place. So thank you for sharing that. All right. So I think the second question I really had for you is, while you're working with these women, so how do you guide them in uncovering these unconscious patterns and beliefs that, hold them back from living authentically?
Yeah. So what I learned kind of a while back in my own healing journey is that the body stores so much information, so much of our past stories. And so I focus basically on using the body as a channel to the subconscious. So that looks like really effectively just guiding women in a meditative kind of state to connect with and communicate really with subtle sensations in their body and different emotions, thoughts, and feelings that they can feel inside. And it's really interesting because it often like opens up this like visual experience for them where they can like see different versions of themselves, have conversations with them, and kind of like really pull up some of the like emotions that may have been like suppressed for a long time.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And with that, I think I want to talk about trauma a little bit. So trauma often feels like an, unchangeable part of us. And we kind of feel like, our world is gone and we've lost it all. And so how do you kind of help people kind of reframe and, heal from a deeper level? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think like the most important thing is that we don't need to focus too much on on like the experience itself, the traumatic
Mm,
experience, because it just really brings it back up. Like
right.
my role really is looking at, okay, what's happening in the present? Like what behavioral patterns or thought cycles are you getting stuck in the present? And we
Mm,
just tackle them. Like what's the belief underneath them?
yeah.
What's the like response patterns that come up with them, rather than like really necessarily getting into the nitty gritty of like what actually happened,
Yeah.
because it makes us more empowered in the present to be like, okay, like I can change these things. Like maybe not change what happened to you in the past, but you can change like the beliefs that you live by, or the beliefs that govern you from your subconscious, basically.
Mm. Yeah, that's interesting. And I was kind of I also feel like because you said you don't really kind of touch upon like what's happened and get into like a deeper level of kind of nitty-gritty of things on what actually happened. So have you found like
Well,
what's more powerful? Like I've often kind of heard people when they share the story or share what caused them trauma, they feel a bit like relieved. It feels like, they're able to kind of spill their heart out. So along with that, I mean, when you do kind of work with these women, kind of into a deeper layer of the trauma and helping them release this, so do you kind of also embrace certain maybe healing modalities along with it to help them, like, tools? I'm kind of talking about tools that you may be using to help them with the trauma.
yeah. So when I say not focusing on it, like there is that space of like
Yeah.
talking about some of the things, like sometimes that process needs to happen, obviously.
Yeah.
But I think it's just not like having that consume the whole thing. Like look at the things that we can control
Uh,
and change, and be empowered with that instead. And yeah, so like there's various tools that we will use, or that like I help like teach them to like use in their day to day, and that's a lot to do with just like emotional regulation,
mm,
and just building up like a relationship with their body, because for most people, like we live in a world where we're like predominantly in our heads, and so for a lot of people, like being really in touch with that feeling based like sense in their body is not like the norm.
yeah.
So but in order to really be in control of those emotional responses and like be like the conscious kind of person, like conscious driver of like your reality and your behaviors, you really have to be connected to your body. So
Mm,
like that's some of like the basic stuff
mm,
that we would do, is just like that's like the starting point really, is developing
yeah.
that relationship. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I sometimes wonder if certain people kind of go on and live their life even without realizing that these kind of behaviors or kind of experiences they're having in their lives may be coming from their traumas, and they maybe don't even know it, they have a trauma or something like that, right? And that's kind of their body remembers, and it's kind of manifesting out into their reality at that time. So I always kind of encourage our guests to like share any actionable insights, simple things that people can start doing today in order to kind of recognize maybe or accept or recognize the trauma and kind of take that first step towards it, towards healing themselves or healing the body. So what would you kind of recommend in your experience?
So I think if it's a case of they're not aware that these patterns are being coming from like
Mm,
past traumas or past wounds, then I would just again just focus more on the present moment. Like look at patterns or the experiences that you're having in your life and look at what ones make you feel good, what ones make you feel uncomfortable, which ones make you feel safe. Like really just start to like analyze in a way like your present life and like look at, if you look through like your past, like you can reflect on your experiences and see like, okay, how did I respond in that moment? Did that really serve me? Like what was my underlying kind of intention or fear? Because I think like a lot of time we just, without the awareness, like we think that the patterns of behaviors are just part of who we are or just part of our personality. And actually, a lot of the time they're just like ways that we adapted. They're just adaptive responses. So like things like people pleasing, it's an adaptation, and it was to try and keep you safe at some point. But then when it continues later on in life, it doesn't serve you, and it takes you away from like taking care of your own needs and honoring yourself.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, thank you for shedding light on that. And I guess most people, as you said, lack awareness of just kind of sitting down and breaking their own thoughts. And I think this is something I want to encourage our listeners to do. And I think journaling and even meditation, would you agree, would be kind of great things to get started with? Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Yeah. And what does embodying authenticity mean to you? And how can someone actually recognize when they truly, are aligned with their own truth?
So I would say that living authentically is not just about like sticking to your word and being honest and all of those things, but really it's about like discovering the depths of like who you truly are. So like we take on a lot of like conditioning, programming, beliefs from our parents, beliefs from like generations before us, and but until we start exploring like those things, we just carry them as if they're our own. So it's really about like reflecting on these things and asking yourself, like, does this actually resonate with me? Like, who do I want to be? And do the beliefs that I'm living by right now actually like fit in with that? And then you can start to kind of change things a little bit.
Yeah, I get that. And I want to also kind of touch upon one of the examples you just kind of mentioned is people pleasing is a way of kind of making sure that we are safe, and sort of like a defense mechanism, I think it is. And it's just kind of you just want to please everyone, so you keep the peace. So and that's of course fear driven. So what role does fear actually play in shaping our identities? A little more deeper context, if you can provide us there, that'd be great. And how can we begin to actually release its grip? And what can we start doing so we are not kind of identifying with fear all the time?
So we've kind of already dipped into that with the adaptation. So that's basically what happens. The fear creates an adaptive response, which is the body's way of trying to keep us safe. And then that becomes a pattern that's like ingrained into your system, basically. And there's different ways of kind of like trying to like break free from those patterns. But I would say that like, so if you recognize that you have a people pleasing pattern, for example, right? You can start to explore like what happens for you in the moment when someone asks you to do something and you instantly respond like, yes, okay. Like start sitting with exploring like what that feels like. And one thing that's like a really small starting step, if you see the pattern and you want to change it, would be like literally, I always say pause. Because if you can just pause, because in a moment, like when you're in an experience, different parts of you get triggered depending on what wound is being like triggered in that moment, right? So with a pattern like that, you just want to create a gap between the experience and when you respond to it. Because in the moment, you're triggered, and that part of you is then the part that responds. But if you create that space, you have time to kind of shift your state, your emotional state, from that like activated response, survival response, into back to your rest and digest, to your like level-headed kind of place where you can speak from your truth rather than from your wound. So it's literally just stuff like, don't text back for like an hour, like give yourself space, or just say, oh, can I let you know tomorrow? Like just create a little gap for yourself so that you can be with that feeling and kind of like shift and find out, okay, is this actually how I feel, or is this coming from my wound?
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I think, thank you for sharing that. And even I think a lot of people are very, these days, you just want to keep peace and you just kind of say yes to everything without realizing how that might be affecting yourself physically or emotionally or even mentally. So I think allowing that space is, of course, going to give us time to reflect on, hey, this is what I actually want to do. So I think at the same time, you're being polite and not being rude, and allowing your time, right, to kind of reflect on it. Yeah, totally get that. And I'm not sure if this is something you could share, but I was hoping that maybe you could talk about some of your client journeys or stories as well. So I feel like sometimes, these kind of stories are very impactful. Coming from people's stories are very powerful. And my only hope is that a lot of listeners and viewers listening to this podcast episode, to give them or to let them know, look, you have tools and you have help, you have people, you have communities out there that you can embrace and talk about these things and what's bothering you, and you're never alone. You can always reach out, and that's the kind of message I want to, always give away in every episode. And there's always something I learn as well from our guests every time, which is amazing. So if you can share any of your client journeys or stories that you might have, personally, you were like, oh my God, you were amazed yourself, maybe. But yeah.
So I had an experience with a client recently, which was very interesting. So I'm trying to put this into as little words so it's not too long and complex, but basically she was kind of seeing a pattern where she would like get really defensive with her partner and feel like she needed to defend herself over like things that were not, big things. It was just like something was being triggered in her, and it would just make her respond in like a way that she didn't want to. Like she didn't feel like she was being very kind or loving in the way that she was responding, because something was being triggered within her. But like that, I think that's one thing, is like being brave enough to like look at yourself and say, you know what, I don't like the way that I'm being in this moment. I want to change that. And that gives you so much power in yourself, because instead of identifying with like whatever's happening, you're like becoming the observer of it. And in a session, like we just kind of went into the body and tried to like bring this part out. And she saw this version of her that was basically just like in this little room, which was almost like a cell, really. And she was oh my God, like, why is she in there, kind of thing. And so through her visualization, she kind of took her out of that room and like found out where she wanted to go. And it was like being in this open park place. And she just felt like something energetically shifted almost instantly in that moment. And like why that's so profound for me is because it's almost sounds like such a simple moment, right? This just making this connection to a part of you, right? But it just highlights how much of a disconnect so many of us have within ourselves to all these different parts of us that are still there and still existing, like within us, right? They're causing these responses because they're still in those states of fear or feeling trapped. Because at whatever point we suppressed whatever was going on, we suppressed the emotion, and like that part just stays like tucked away, like just basically crying out for help. And that's also where you'll often have like physical sensations in the body where parts are trying to like communicate something, like some wound that's still trapped in your body is trying to like be expressed.
Yeah.
And that actually happened in a recent session as well, where my client could feel like this knotting sensation. Like as soon as we took her into the body, she was like, okay. And she felt this knotting sensation come up in her shoulder. And so we straight away, I basically tried to like talk to that. So talk to that, like tightening, have a conversation with it. What do you need? Like, what's happening? What are you feeling? As if it's literally like, as if you're talking to another person, basically.
Yeah.
And it sounds kind of insane, but
No.
it works. And like, as soon as she kind of communicated with this part, found out what like was being suppressed underneath that, what emotions were there, and started to like actually let that come through. Then she was like, okay. Then we checked over again, and she's like, yeah, that knotting has already kind of shifted. It's already moved. So
Yeah.
it's literally like a physical. You can feel the physical shift in your body, which is yeah. I still just find it completely wild that
Yeah.
because we've spent so long not seeing this connection between the body and the emotions and like our energy and all those things. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. Oh
pretty
yeah,
cool.
absolutely, absolutely. No, I totally understand that, and I think it's very important that our our bodies, our mental body, our physical, emotional, intuitive, a soul, a spiritual body are aligned in order for you to be in harmony with yourself, with your thoughts, and everything around you. And that totally makes sense,
Yeah.
right? And surprisingly, I was kind of this kind of article popped up on my phone. I was kind of going through things, and it said that they conducted an experiment where they put in no, they have two glasses of water, and each of them kind of had they were kind of building up a snowflake in it. So as they, or even crystals, right? So there were crystals being formed, and they formed with water, and we are made up of 70 to 75% of water. And so one glass kind of received good things. They talked about good things with a lot of love, with compassion. And the other kind of glass received like all negativity it can in the world, right? So it was hated, basically. And they found that the way the crystal shaped up, or the snowflake, was the one that received a lot of love was perfect. And the one that didn't was just couldn't form properly. So I think there's so much evidence out there, even scientifically speaking, for people who are with that kind of mindset, and it's energy, and it works because that's how energy kind of works. So then we have these feelings and everything which are real. So and I totally get that. I totally get that. So thank you for sharing that. I think it was an amazing kind of story. And it's powerful indeed, kind of even to be able to recognize, what's happening within your body, and to kind of releasing that. I think that's
Yeah.
true blessing. So yeah, thank you for sharing. All right, Blaise, and I think there's one more question I want to ask you is, look, this is a big one. So, if there is one kind of universal truth you wish every woman could fully embrace, what would it be, and why?
Well, I think it would probably be that um, your truth lies outside of your comfort zones because it's those like all that we've been talking about today. It's all those like adaptive behaviors and the conditioning and the programming that keeps us in this kind of like perceived comfort zone. And when we're in that, we can't explore more. Like we have to push ourselves out of that in order to like have those different experiences where we're met with discomfort or we're met with like joy in different ways. So we can actually discover more of like, oh, okay, I don't like that. I do like that. Or that doesn't resonate with me. And if we don't push ourselves out of that, like there's so much of ourselves that we might never ever like connect with.
Mm.
So I think
Yeah.
that's really important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful, amazing. Thank you very much for that. And I think with that, we have come to an end to our podcast episode today. But Blaise, it was incredible chatting with you and kind of diving deeper into, layers of our body and, how we can really heal ourselves and how our body is always listening. And so I think you have definitely kind of, tapped into that and provided us a lot of insights towards, kind of just embracing and living authentically. So thank you so much for that. And again, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It was a lovely conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much again, and I hope you have a lovely evening.
And you. All right.
Yes.
Bye.